Hey Blockheads, happy Wednesday and welcome to our final block in Blockheads. This is block 30. We started out our whole Blockheads journey with an original Blockheads designer, Betsy Chuchy, and so it's only fitting that today we're wrapping up Blockheads 5 with another original Blockheads designer, Lynne Hagmeier of Kansas Troubles Quilters. Her Shadow Star block is a perfect star addition to our Blockheads project. If you haven't already, let's download your pattern and get sewing. So the first step of making our Shadow Star block is to do our 4-at-a-time flying geese. If you've been following along for a while, you know I love the 4-at-a-time flying geese method. So let's walk through the quick steps to making our flying geese. If you want a more detailed tutorial, if you check back to some of our previous Blockheads videos, I've gone step by step through and given some really detailed tutorials on using this method for making flying geese. We're going to hit the highlights today. So we're going to start out, I've got my 3.5-inch blocks and then my 4, 2, and an 1/8-inch blocks for the corners of my flying geese. Your instructions have all the cutting measurements. I'm making the 6-inch block, so my measurements are going to correspond to making the 6-inch block. For our 4-at-a-time flying geese, we're going to start out by layering 2 squares like this. Now imagine that I've drawn a line from point to point here. I'm going to sew a scant 1/4-inch seam on either side of that line. So I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine, go ahead and stitch down the first 2 squares in this process and come back and show you the next step. I'm back. I've sewn down the first 2 squares here, and you can see here are my stitch lines. Those are a scant 1/4-inch seam on either side of what would be a marked line if you decide to actually draw the line on your squares. So now we'll cut those apart just like that, and you can start to see how our flying geese is going to take shape. I'm going to press these triangles out, and then I'll add another square right here in this bottom corner, and then repeat the process. Sew a scant 1/4-inch seam on either side of the center line and cut and press. Okay, so here is what that 1/2 looks like when I've pressed out those 2 triangles. Now I'll take my 3rd square, I'm going to lay it right here in the bottom corner, and I just want to point out that when you're sewing your scant 1/4-inch on either side of, if you want to mark a line, you can do that. You've got a handy little visual guide here in the valleys that's made here at the opposite side of your square. So I know that if my needle starts in the valley here, I've got my scant 1/4-inch seam. You can mark a line and have that visual there too, but just as an extra backup, I like to make sure that I'm starting here in the valley and then I'm ending in the valley on this end when I turn it around. Now I've sewn these, so they're all ready to go. Once again, I will just cut right there from point to point, and I'll separate these out, and I'll have 4 flying geese that are ready to trim. I give you cutting instructions that give you oversized flying geese so you can trim down. I like that method when using 4-at-a-time for making flying geese, because then you get really precise flying geese units because you're trimming down. So let's take a look at how to trim down a flying geese. I have got my flying geese here pressed out, and I'm ready to trim them down. Now again, I'm going to be talking about the 6-inch finished block measurements, so make sure you check your pattern if you're making the 12-inch block so you know what size to trim down your flying geese to. It'll be different from mine. I'm trimming mine down to 1.5 inches by 2.5 inches. The key to trimming down your flying geese is to make sure that the apex of your triangle here is at the halfway point of the trim down measurement. Okay, so I'm trimming to 2.5 inches wide, so that means the apex of my triangle needs to be at 1.25 inch on my ruler. So I'm going to find that 1.25 inch point, and you see I'm also down 1/4 inch. That's my seam allowance here at the top, and I've got this 45-degree angle line on the seam of my triangle, so I know everything's going to be square, everything's going to be nice, I'm not going to have a wonky flying geese. And now you can see how much I'm going to trim away. So I've got a decent amount to trim. That's when I say I give you oversized flying geese, this is what I mean. It just lets you get a nice, precise flying geese unit. So I've trimmed those 2 sides. Now let's flip it around. I'm going to find my 1.25 point. There it is there. I've got my 1/4 inch seam allowance is maintained, and there is that 45-degree line on my triangle. So I know I'm going to be nice and centered. And I'll trim that away. There we go. Look how pretty. So I'm gonna finish trimming the rest of my flying geese and then we'll come back and pick up with the next step. Okay, we've got all our flying geese made. There's two sets of flying geese for this block. We've got one set that's going to have the background as the center, and then the other set is going to have that, our center fabric. It's the darker print in your pattern with the star points. So the next part is to just assemble the little units that are going to come together to make the whole block. So we have our two 1.5 inch squares and our 1.5 inch by 2.5 inch rectangle. Again, this is for the 6 inch block. These are going to make our corner units. This is just really simple piecing. I pressed towards the B fabric on these, and that's going to help the fabrics nest a little bit, about half the time when we assemble the whole block. So this is simple. You can chain piece, just put those squares together and then join them to the rectangle. I pressed towards the rectangle when I made these corner units. Now for joining our two flying geese together to make our chevron unit, my trick is to always make sure that I've got my flying geese on top so that I can see my point, so that when I'm joining these together, I can make sure that I don't lose my point in the seam. If I'm sewing it this way with just this solid center triangle fabric, I can't see my point. So just make sure that you always have the flying geese on top so that you can watch that point in your seam allowance. So just join these with a scant 1/4 inch seam, join your corner units here with a scant 1/4 inch seam, and then we'll be ready to assemble the block. I've got all of my units laid out here and I'm ready to assemble my full block, and I can already see I love the impact of this lighter fabric in the center, so I'm very excited to get this block put together. Now when I join my rows together, I like to press towards the corner units, and then my center row I press towards that center square. It just helps to reduce the bulk a little bit, and then I will also have nicely nested seams when I start sewing the rows together. There is a little bit of bulk in this block. We've got a lot of seams here. So if you need some help getting some flatter seams, I definitely recommend using Acorn Easy Press fabric treatment. It's really great. It's kind of like a starch, but it doesn't shrink your fabric. It just helps you get a nice flat seam. We have these Easy Press pens. You can just fill the pen with the liquid, and then it's got like a marker tip, and you'll just press along on the back side of your seam. Just press it along there to apply that fabric treatment, and then press with a hot dry iron, and that helps you get super flat seams. So definitely check that out if you're struggling with the bulk. I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine and I'm going to assemble my block, and then we'll take a look at my two finished blocks and compare my fabric placement. I'm back with my finished blocks, and I love how both of them turned out. So this whole time I've been doing one block in a traditional palette of fabrics and then another block in like a shabby cottagey Americana. It's given me a great opportunity to play around with color placement and value in each of my blocks. So you can see here with my traditional one, I kind of flipped the script from what the black and white diagram has. I used my lightest fabric on the inside and then went darker as it went out. And then for my Americana, I went with a dark center star, but I kept the background kind of light. And I just love the way both of these pop. When I sew my blocks together, I always press my row seams open. I just think that helps make my blocks nice and flat, and again, helps with that bulk. This is it, you guys. We're done with Blockheads 5. Can't believe it, 30 blocks. We have been covering all kinds of techniques, all kinds of designs. We've gone traditional, we've gone modern, we've done some applique, we've done some foundation paper piecing. I hope that you have learned some new skills and tried some new techniques. And I hope you've gotten to know our designers as well. We've had so many new designers participating this time, and it's been great to have all of the new faces in our Blockheads roster. I just want to take a quick moment to thank all of our designers for all their hard work and their great inspiration. We really appreciate y'all. I want to thank everyone who's been sewing along with us in our Facebook group. We have over 73,000 people in the group. It's a wonderful community and so much inspiration there. I want to thank all of my Moda teammates who have been sewing along and helping us out. It's been so much fun to sew these blocks with everyone this year. So I hope you've enjoyed Blockheads 5. Don't forget to join us on Facebook. It's still time. It's never too late to get started with Blockheads. There's no schedule. You can just just sew at your own pace. Follow along on Instagram with the hashtag Moda Blockheads 5. If you've liked this video, there's lots more, so don't forget to check out our YouTube channel. Hit that like and subscribe button. Thanks so much, everybody. Happy sewing, and we'll see you next time.